Not going to do the interview unless you guys give her a ton of energy. So everybody, please.
So I'm a walker and a talker. I'll try not to trip over this mic. I don't have a presentation for you guys tonight. I think it's better for me to kind of tell you a bit about my experience and then really open up to Q&A. I find when you can learn through other people's experiences, it's probably easier for you to, understand it all. And I'm an open book, so I generally answer all questions. So my name is Brie Schmidt. I'm a managing broker at Second City Real Estate. I actually own 8 different companies. I don't know how that happened. I'll tell this kind of story about it all, but it just kind of happened over time. So I will start with, I was not in real estate. I worked in corporate advertising. I spent 9 years building my career, and my goal one day was to be a CEO, a female CEO. I wanted to, run a bunch of big businesses with a bunch of employees and travel all over the country. And if anyone here has traveled for work, it sounds really cool in your 20s, and then it really, really sucks. So after about 7 years of traveling, I did an in and out to San Francisco, which is the same day trip, 9 hours on an airplane, it sucks. I realized that this wasn't the life that I wanted for myself. So a couple of things happened. In 2011, I was buying a property with my first husband. We were, talking about, we weren't even married yet. We were gonna, the house, the kids, the whole suburban American dream sort of thing, and realized that multi-units, 2 to 4s in the north side of Chicago, were selling for $100,000 less than single-family houses. So our thought process was, we don't have kids yet, we don't have a family, let's buy this building, and then we can eventually, as we need more space and our family grows, deconvert unit by unit, and then 10 years down the road, we've got our single-family house. I had no idea what I was doing. Luckily, it was a really good purchase and it cash flows. But, things like, I've never talked with another investor, I've never read a book about investing. I just looked at, hey, my mortgage is this, and it brings this much in rent, and, we'll just save some money in case something goes wrong at some point, right? Turned out, we bought a building, it was gut rehabbed. Luckily, that building was good. We didn't have many problems. And about 9 months after I purchased that building, I was still working corporate. I had a death in the family. And it was a really close family member of mine that passed away the day before they were supposed to retire. And it just really resonated with me and my family. Of all the times, hey, when I retire, I'm gonna go do this. And when I retire, I'm gonna go to Thailand. And when I retire, I'm gonna go to Europe. And then they got super sick and died 6 months later. And I was at the time, I think 28, and was like, crap, what am I gonna do? I've been traveling now for 6-7 years. This is getting exhausting. Like, how can I do this for the next 30 years and still maintain my sanity? And realize that, this is not the life that I wanted for myself, and had to figure out how do I build something around the life that I want. So I remember my husband and I sat down and we looked at, what are our goals in life? The 2 main goals were, well, the one thing was, we wanted to do whatever we wanted to do when we wanted to do it. Plain and simple. Amen. Thank you, yeah. Yesterday I slept till 9 o'clock in the morning because I could. I travel 8 to 10 weeks a year. It's having that sort of lifestyle was always what we were building towards. So we sat down and looked at, our jobs. He was a geologist, I was in sales. There was no way in hell our companies, we could barely take off a week at a time, let alone a month vacation. So we were gonna learn to code. Both of us were not very tech savvy, but that was our first idea. I was like, hey, if we learned to code, we could code from a beach in Thailand and still do freelance work. So at that point, we'd owned the house for almost a year. We're like, this landlording thing is not that hard. Maybe if we just keep buying more of these buildings, then we have enough cash flow, and that's what will pay down our mortgages. So for the first 3 years, I still had never read a book on investing. I never talked to an investor. I'd never gone to a meetup. I bought 1 building per year. And then after my 3rd building is when I figured out that there was a whole world of investors out there that made my life so much easier by sharing their experiences with me, which is why I do these sort of events, to share my experiences with others. So where I'm at today, I own 31 properties, 92 units. I own 3 properties in my personal name. I own 18 properties in an LLC that I own 100% of. And then I own another 10 properties, excuse me, in an LLC with partners. So I've done commercial lending, residential lending. I only do buy and hold. I work with partners. I've done my own deals, and that's where my experience is. And since then, I have started my brokerage company. I've actually been licensed since 2004 and started my own firm in 2014, which is Second City Real Estate. We now have 3 agents that work with specifically buy and hold investors in the north side of Chicago, and then buy and hold investors and fix and flip investors in like the Berwyn, Cicero, Riverdale area. We just brought on an agent. And one of the things I think that we do a little bit differently than other people is we're all investors first. And we all take a very educational approach to things, right? So we try to learn or teach, we try to learn you. We try to teach you that it's not always sunshine and rainbows, right? This job is it's not one of those things where you watch the infomercial and guess what, tomorrow you can be a millionaire. It doesn't work that way. So that's what I kind of wanted to talk about tonight, was what the realities of landlording is. And I'll start off with any questions.
We'll kind of do like a
Oh, sure, yeah, whatever you want.
So starting out, I mean, you bought your first property and you bought your second and third. How did you acquire the financing for each of those, the second and the third purchase?
The first was a house hack FHA. I remember we had $12,500, and that was like our life savings at that point. I am a super frugal person. I still am today. So it's to me about budgeting, right, and sacrifices. I'm really big about understanding what things I need and what things I want. And then, so for me, like we went to Vegas, I remember a couple years ago, and like our friend dropped like $1,000 on a roulette game. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna vomit. Like, I just can't, I can't do it. Like the thought of even like being, like it just made me crazy. Like but I will drop $20,000 on a 6-week trip to Europe, no problem. But my dress is probably from Target. Like that's just how it is. So I learned very early on with my husband, both of us, to assess, right, what we needed and what we wanted. And sacrificing with the budget isn't about living, it's about living below your means, but not being desolate, right? So if Starbucks is your thing and you still want to get your cup of Starbucks every morning, do it, right? But then maybe pack your lunch. Like figure out what works for you and what's important. So the first one we bought with FHA, at that time our rents from our 2 units covered our mortgage. So we lived for free. And then we were able to budget and live only on my husband's income. So we were banking my income and living for free. 18 months later is when we were able to buy our second property, which was a 25% down rehab property in Portage Park. And then
where did you get the financing for that? Was it
traditional 30-year fixed residential loans?
So through a loan officer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's super generic, nothing really creative. And then somehow we bought a third property, which was, it's a funny story. I remember this property came in the market. We had just closed on the 3-unit in Portage Park, and this would be a house for us. And I remember looking at the property, my husband was like, I really want to go see this. It was an estate sale in North Center in Bell School District. It needed a whole ton of work. We had no experience doing that. And he's like, I love this house. I'm like, this is really not a logical decision. Like, we've never done a rehab. We don't have the money to do a rehab. But it went off the market, and I was like, see, it's fate. Like, it's off the market, it's done. And then a month later, I saw it came back in the market. And I'm like, I'm not gonna tell him. Like, he's gonna want to go see this stupid house. And I remember we were cooking dinner, and the agent called me. He was standing next to me, and he heard the phone call. I was like, man, like this is just, I'm like, it just does not make logical sense. So I remember we went and saw it on a Sunday. We were in the house for literally 2 minutes, and he looked at me, he's like, you know we're buying this house, right? We were one of 26 offers. Again, it was an estate sale in Bell. The rehab, we decided to do a really easy, we had $30,000, really easy 3-week, $30,000 renovation. I think it ended up being like $80,000 on our credit cards because we didn't have the money for it. So we used our 0% interest credit cards. We moved into a house with no hot water or no appliances for like 2 weeks. And yeah, it was really rough. It was really, really rough. But it was also a really great purchase. So after 6 months, we were able to refinance out of it. So we bought it for $330. We put 80 in, so we were all in for $410. It appraised 6 months later for $650. So we were able to pull the cash out. It was around that same time that I had found a website called Bigger Pockets, which made me realize there was a whole world of really dorky people like me that wanted to talk real estate all day long, like I did. And that was the demise of my job as well. So I had this money and I didn't know what to do with it. And so that's when I found Bigger Pockets. And it was a good thing and a bad thing. It was a good thing because I think I really would have screwed up and made some really dumb choices if you have that kind of money. It was also a bad thing that I got to a point where everything was shiny. You know, like one day I'm like, I'm gonna do notes. And then someone told me about something, like, ooh, that sounds really cool. I'm gonna do that now too. And like after 3 months, I got really, really overwhelmed by all the different options and everyone's advice. And there's so many like smart people out there telling you what they did and that you wanna copy them too. And I had to stop. And I remember sitting down and stopping and taking a pen and paper and writing, what am I good at and what do I not like doing? And I wrote down all the things I like to do. I wrote down all the things I don't like to do. And then I kind of went through all my investing options, like which one fits in with my strategy. And it came out to buy and hold was what, it's what I like to do. It's not sexy, it's really, really boring. I spend most of my days in my pajamas looking at Excel sheets and running numbers, but it's what I love. And it fit into our lifestyle goals as well. So at that point, I looked at Indianapolis, Kansas City, and Milwaukee. I literally just picked 3 cities. I'm a control freak, so I didn't want to be too far away, but I wanted to look at quote unquote cash flow markets, right? So I love the north side of Chicago. It's definitely contributed to my overall wealth appreciation or my wealth gain, but it's not a cash flow market. So I literally went online and found 3 different agents in each city and called them up and said, hey, I'm gonna spend $500,000 in the next 6 months. I'm gonna come down there for a day, show me what you would buy. And it was a really interesting experience because it was kind of like you got thrown into the market, right? Everyone had no agent showed me the same 2 houses, which I thought was interesting. And they all had really different strategies, and I spent the whole day with them learning asking questions. Why would you do it this way? What would you do? And for me, I focused on Milwaukee. I like Milwaukee. If anyone here's from Milwaukee, it's like a mini Chicago. They get really pissed when you say that though, but it totally is. It totally is. But I like the dense urban environment I'm comfortable with. I've been in Chicago for 12 years. I grew up in the suburbs, but like the suburban, sprawling, single family market, I don't necessarily get it. So I like the close to downtown stuff. So that's why I chose Milwaukee, so the market felt really comfortable for me. And then it just kind of snowballed from there.
So one thing I'm taking away from this too, how many people have taken advantage of an FHA loan or a VA loan? Not just I love what you did right off the bat. I mean, you're thinking, even though you weren't exposed to Bigger Pockets, you went and bought a 3-unit building right off the bat. So if you've never bought a property yet, everybody's trying to do a deal, everybody's trying to flip a property. This is a way to become a property investor right off the bat and really leverage your money to the highest level. I mean, you can get if you're a veteran, you can literally put 0% down and move into a 4-unit building. So you did an FHA, you had to bring $10,000, but that's an easy way. Anybody here that's working a job and they have no idea where they should even get started, that right there to me is a great entry point. And you don't need to have all the knowledge in the world to start off because you kind of just figured it out. Were the units rented when you moved in the first?
No, they were vacant.
Okay.
So it was a fun learning experience. The funny thing is it's been 6.5 years. I bought the building vacant. I got it rented out in the first 2 days. Again, I had no idea what I was doing. I did not use Chicago leases. Like, I mean, it was a mess. But the tenants to this day are still friends of mine. And I actually just talked to one of them this weekend, 6.5 years later. And it was a really, really positive experience. And it still is. I live with tenants in my building now. It's something that I think it takes. One of the things I think that I've done really well, and which makes it easier for me to do my job today, is that I self-manage. I still self-manage my Chicago stuff. But it gives me the opportunity, and I'll get into this whole, Milwaukee property management, scaling a business side of things, is I know when I'm expecting my property manager to do their job, and I know when I'm asking them to do me a favor. So when I call them and say, like, why is this taking 4 days to get this done? I know based on experience. Or like, hey, listen, I know this is like a 4-day project. I need it done in 2. Would you mind? Right? So it gives me the experience to know also what they're charging me for things. I just yell. I'm gonna go up there on Thursday and yell at my man. I got a new manager and they kind of suck. But they sent me a bill. Who here knows furnaces? Anyone? So they sent me a bill for furnaces with like 3 different parts replaced. And I called them up and said, yeah, a thermocouple, the flame sensor, and then the blower. And I'm like, you just sent someone over there to just start replacing shit and see what worked. Like, that's exactly what you do. Because a flame sensor and a thermocouple is if it's blowing cold air. And then you fix the blower if it's not blowing air. Those are 2 completely different problems that are not related to each other. So someone needs to explain to me, like, that that's what doing this sort of experience, like, it gives me the ability to do that kind of thing. But with low money down programs, you have a few options. Obviously, VA is a 0% down program. If you're lucky enough to be a veteran, thank you for your service. That is a great loan option. The other options are a 5% down conventional program. This program is only available if you currently do not own property. So it's a first-time buyer program. If you have a condo, you can sell your condo in the morning and buy a 3-flat that afternoon, as long as the first one closes. But it's only available in certain census tracts. So you're not going to be able to find it in Lincoln Park, Bucktown, but you can definitely find it in Overing Park, Avondale, Albany Park, Porridge Park, like the northwest side of the city. And then there's FHA, which is 3.5% down. That is not a first-time buyers program. A lot of people think it is. You can do that. I can do FHA right now with 30 properties, over 30 properties. You just can't have more than one at a time. So the common strategy people use is the 5% down on the first, and then you can do the FHA in the second, and that way you can utilize 2 low money down programs. Or if you're doing VA, you do the 5% in the first, then the VA, and then the 3.5% down to be able to use all 3 programs. Yeah. Call it property stacking.
Yeah. I mean, that's, again, that's a strategy. If you're in this room and you've never bought a property, that's the best way to leverage cheap money. I mean,
And so I can just give you examples. So as an agent, I work specifically on the north side of Chicago. And last year, I use averages. So last year, our average client put $30,000 down and bought a house for $550,000. Living for free is no longer an option. It's just not realistic in this market. But I think I looked at it with living in the owner's unit, like the nicest top floor, 3-bedroom, whatever unit. Their rent was down to maximum $1,100 a month. Most were around the $700 range after all expenses. Yeah?
Going back to the 5% down.
Uh-huh.
So if you already currently own property, you transfer that to an LLC?
Nope.
Nope, so you gotta sell it, so.
Because if you currently own the property, so it depends. So with LLCs, right, depends on your state and depends on how the LLC is structured. But if, like for me, I own my LLC. Yeah. With my first husband, we owned it, and now I own it 100%. Illinois and Wisconsin both recognize marriage as a single member LLC. So I can put it on my Schedule E, or I can put it on my 1065 if it's the 2 of us. But it's still owned by you. If you own it with partners, I think you have to own less than 20% of the property for them not to count it towards your owned properties. But LLCs are not the end-all be-all savior for a lot of things. People think that LLCs offer a lot more than they do. And so most times, even if you're married or it's just you, it offers 0 protection or 0 benefits.
So then when you were doing the 5%, then how did you do that if you were?
I didn't do the 5%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the program was not available. I would totally do it in a heartbeat.
Okay.
The program was not available when I was buying. But if anyone here, who's done an FHA? Okay, so if you're doing less than 20% down, it requires something called PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. So with FHA, your private mortgage insurance is about $75 for every $100,000 you finance, right? So if your loan is $400,000, your PMI is going to be $600. With the 5% down program, it's $50 for every $100,000 you finance. So your PMI is automatically going to be $200 less a month. With the 5% down program, your PMI drops off at 78%. With FHA, it's forever. And then FHA charges a 1.75% upfront fee that's rolled into your loan. That 5% does not. So between those two programs, if you're looking at the options, 5% down is the hands down best option to go with. FHA is a decent program. It's more expensive.
Right, I mean, well, okay, but if you're doing that 5%, who's offering that? I mean, where are you getting that through? Is that
Every pretty much bank.
Any bank would do that?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's called the Home Ready program, if you want to write that down. Home Ready program. It's through Fannie Mae. And there's a website too. I'm sure if you Google like the Home Ready program or Home Possible program, there's a map where you can put in addresses and it will tell you if that program is available for that specific address. Because it goes by census tracts. There are, like I said, you can buy in Lincoln Park. It does have a $79,000 a year income limit, which, you know, for people like, oh great, I make $60,000, I'll qualify. They add in the rental income. So when they throw the rental income in, you usually have to make under $25,000 or $30,000, at which point you won't be able to afford a house in Lincoln Park anyways.
Okay. What's the credit score?
What's the credit? I don't know the credit score. That's outside my realm of experience. I don't know.
But in order to get that, you cannot own a property.
Correct, you cannot own a property. So I've had that happen 3 times last year where the client sold their condo in the morning, 9 a.m. closing, and then they bought their property at 11 o'clock that morning.
So that would be good if you're doing fix and flips then?
It's a 1-year occupancy requirement.
Okay, so
You have to live there. So
Yeah.
we'll do questions at the end. So I just want to, that way we logically go through it and then we'll open it up. No, that's all right. Great question. So how did you go from properties 2, 3, those were all conventionally bought. Now let's get into some of the creative ways that you've acquired some of your properties.
Nothing creative.
Oh, okay.
Crazy, maybe. But nothing creative. So the story is that I'd gone to those 3 cities. I talked with 3 different agents. I'd liked Milwaukee, and I remember looking at a 3-unit, and the listing agent was there. And we walked in the property and he, saw his first 4 tenants. He's like, hey, how was your kid's soccer game? I'm like, oh, good, he won. Like, cool. And like, we go to the next floor and he's like, oh, hey, how was so-and-so's test? And like, I just remember like, I like this guy, right? Like, that's the kind of attitude I have with my tenants. And I'm a very big proponent of understanding tenant class and what kind of people you're gonna deal with, right? If you offer slummy units, you're gonna get slummy people. Simple as that. I like to offer, I will not buy a building, or unless I'm gonna rehab it, in a condition that I would not live in myself. Granted, I don't need to live in granite, stainless, whatever, but I can't be having moldy bathrooms, or like just disgusting stuff. But this guy really, I liked him a lot, and I remember leaving that showing and being like, so are you the owner or the agent? He was like, I'm both. I was like, cool, like, I'm gonna buy your property. And he was like, okay. I'm like, do you have more? And he's like, no, I don't, but my family does. I was like, really? And so it turns out that his mother-in-law, she was a school teacher. She'd been investing in the area for 50 years. And she, like, every few years, she'd just buy another property. And then, their whole family, like, his wife was HVAC, his brother-in-law was a plumber. Their whole family had a network. They all owned and managed properties in this area. So I ended up buying the first 5 properties off of him and his family. And then he came on board as my original manager. So when I was learning the market and before I kind of understood things, we always would. He said his wife was like a 5'2" looking Barbie thing, and she was like 90 pounds. But she's an HVAC contractor. So whenever our furnaces would go out, Freya is who would have to go fix them. So the rule always was, would he send his wife to that area at 9 o'clock at night to fix the furnace? And if he said no, then I just wouldn't buy that property. It was as simple as that. That's how I bought my first 10, essentially, was just asking him, like, would you send her there? And he's like, nope, done. So we did commercial financing. It was pretty standard, 20% down, commercial 5-year balloon. I had to start an LLC. The reason I did that, and I'll explain, is with residential financing, either it's at VA, FHA, 5% down, 20% down, 25% down. You can have 10 loans before they cap you out. The caveat though is that after 5, you cannot cash out refinance in anything that you do not live in. So I knew I was buying in Chicago. I knew I was smart and bought at a good time. Well, I was lucky. And I bought at a good time. And I did not want to stop myself from being able to pull the equity out someday. So that was one reason. Second reason, I also knew I was going to be buying a bunch of properties at once and I would hit that limit quite soon. So my thoughts were, why not just go into commercial off the bat, start a banking relationship. So I did what any somewhat smart person would do, and I just started randomly calling banks. Super excited. I found this portfolio before I met Carlos. I'd found this other portfolio I was going to buy. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. So I just started like legit looking up people on Google and calling them and be like, hey, I'm this great investor from Chicago. I'm going to buy all these properties. You should work with me. Here's my numbers. And they're all like, nah, no. So one of my problems was, I only owned 3 properties. I only had experience for 2.5 years at that point on paper. So in commercial, they look at character, credit, capabilities, capital, and cap rate. So I was a little bit light. And so I must have called 50 different banks. And the other problem was I was out of state. So out of state, I didn't have a lot of experience. I didn't have, if I had a partner that was local, they were more willing to work with me. But I didn't really know anyone in Milwaukee. And so I looked up some guy on LinkedIn. I remember, and I messaged him like, I've got this portfolio, I need help. I remember he called me on a Sunday morning, like at 10 o'clock. He's like, I've got someone that works with you. They're gonna charge you 2 points. They're a commercial broker, but they said that they've got someone they were looked over, they're good to go. So let's screw it for, it was $5,000 in points, whatever they think that deal was. And that's been my bank ever since.
So what I get from this is kind of like Colonel Sanders, right? I don't know if you guys heard the story about how Colonel Sanders went literally from, I believe it was store to store to sell his recipe. The first place he went to did not say yes. You did a lot of effort to find one, right?
I felt like a lady in the night, like not joking.
But that's the thing, like I've heard so many investors tell me, oh, I can't do it, I was just turned down by this, or I tried that doesn't work. Well, yeah, maybe you only tried it once. Like, what I'm hearing from Brie is she did not give up. She just kept hitting the streets, picking up the phone, making calls, call after call after call after call, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, doing whatever it takes, and that's, so kudos to you, that's awesome. So they're your bank, are they still your bank for all your purchases now?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so the bank, it's a regional bank, US bank. They're nothing special, but they're interesting. They have not changed, so commercial lenders don't follow what we call conforming guidelines, so they can make up their own rules. US Bank has not changed their lending guidelines since like 1965. So they're very black and white. They've got 10 boxes, you must check every single box. But once you check their boxes, it's like the easiest relationship ever. And I learned, so one of the things that I learned is I try to communicate with people how they communicate to me, right? So if I'm working with client A and client B, or talking to investor A or investor B, I communicate differently for those different people. So with commercial lending, it's very numbers based. So one of the first things I did was I sent him over my deal. He came back to me and said, you have it at this cap rate, it's actually this. And so I called him and said, walk me through how you got there. I want to understand how you underwrite deals. So one of the things I learned, my rate was 5% for 5 years. They underwrite it at 6.5. They're going to assume that over the 25-year amortization, your rate's going to go up, the average is going to be 6.5. So I changed my Excel. So moving forward, I knew exactly what they wanted. They wanted tax returns, they wanted leases, they wanted the contract, and they wanted to understand the numbers. I sent them the file in however their underwriter looks at it. My deals will get approved in 3 days. It was such an easy process. I've got 23 loans with them now.
And you're talking US Bank, the national lender?
They're region, they're not in all states.
Oh, okay.
I think they're in whatever, half the states. But then I've got to go through annual review, so every year I have to submit my tax returns, prove that, my properties are around as profitable as I thought they were. But after that, I could buy, a few $1 million in 3 days if I wanted to, because I've already gone through that approval with them. Other banks I've dealt with two of my partners. One of them lives in Italy, so he did not check one of their boxes. And then another one had a charge off that he couldn't get over from a couple years ago. Dealing with other commercial banks sucks. I don't like it. And that is now a requirement for all my partnerships, is that they must get pre-qualified with US Bank, because I won't work with any other bank.
Now, what's your favorite kind of property that you've been acquiring? Do you like a 3-flat, a 4-unit? Do you like larger units, like an 8-unit?
That's a great question. Everything I own except for one is between 2 and 4 units. I do own a 6-unit, but it's a 4-unit front house and then a 2-unit back house. So I get asked this question a lot of why, there's a lot of glitz and glamour and trend around multifamily and syndications and all this really fancy stuff. I'll tell you exactly why I don't do it. I'm a control freak. So I like having my stuff for myself. My partners, I chose very, very wisely. I knew each of them for over a year before I even considered working with them. There was a year vetting period for me so that we could understand each other and know each other. It's super important rather than taking people's money. But the multifamily world, at least in the areas I invest, in Milwaukee and Chicago, it really comes down to housing stock, right? So if you think about Chicago, like this neighborhood, I own a couple properties not too far from here at all. Think of how the houses are set up, right? There's not a ton of these big commercial buildings. So you're limiting yourself by only focusing on one part, right? So I ended up buying 18 properties in 9 months. It was a little insane. And I could have bought a big building instead of buying 18 of those properties. The thing though was that there wasn't a lot of big buildings around. I didn't want to sacrifice an area just to get that kind of building. But I also found out that the expenses are a lot different. So when you're a 4-unit and under, you're considered residential. So you pay residential water rates, you get homeowners insurance, your garbage is handled through the city, but as soon as you get to be commercial, you are now a business. Business insurance, business water rates, you've got to pay for your own trash service, you have to pay for your own recycling service. So whenever I looked at Chicago and Milwaukee, whenever I looked at the cost per unit, or the rent per unit, right? Your 5-unit next to my 2-unit, that are both 2 bedrooms, we're gonna get the same rent, right? You don't have a gym, you don't have amenities that are gonna increase your rents over mine. But when I look at the expenses on his building are a lot more than mine. So the cap rates always ended up being better for me to buy 2 to 4s. It also gives me another exit strategy. I could sell to an owner occupied. I can sell to another small investor. Once you get above 5, you have to go commercial loans, you have to go LLCs. Not everybody wants to play that game, and it limits yourself.
So, my thought on, so how do you keep it cost advantageous to you as an owner for doing like shoveling on a 2-unit versus like a 5-unit, obviously, or let's just say a 16-unit, you got one person that does the shoveling. So how do you manage your snow shoveling and your grass cutting on like 2 units? I would think that would be a lot more maintenance.
So what's really cool about Milwaukee is tenants shovel snow. It's common up there. I know, right? It's great. But we do lawn care. So when I planned out the Milwaukee adventure, I'll call it that, the Milwaukee adventure, I knew from learning from other investors that one of the reasons why I grew so fast was for scale, right? Scale is incredibly important for a lot of reasons. So with all of my units, they're within about a 2.5-mile radius of each other. So with I've had in-house property management, I've hired out property management, right? We pretty much employ like a full-time plumber. He's always in the neighborhood. There's always something going on with that many units that we can afford to keep him in house. Same thing with our carpenter, right? So tenants do their snow up there. Here in Chicago, I pay for it. And then up there, we've got a guy that will go mow, 30 lawns in a day. And he charges me like $20 a lawn because he'll just knock them out back to back. But again, I think I'm really focused on focus. So I only invest in one zip code pretty much up there. Even my Chicago stuff is within a 5-mile radius of each other. I don't know anything else outside of those areas. I just got a text the other day from a friend of mine in Denver about a property in Broadview and Olympia Fields, and I go, what state is that? Seriously, I don't, like if it's outside of my 5-mile radius, I've got no idea what's going on. But I know everything that's going on in my 5-mile radius, and that's how I've developed my business intentionally for that specific reason.
Yeah, because that's what my thoughts were on a 2-unit. If you own multiple 2 units, like let's say if you had one in Olympia Fields, it's almost impossible to manage this, because grass is easier, but with the snow, it's like you could have a snowfall tonight and you gotta have some.
Oh, it's a huge pain.
Yeah.
Even with management, I was just talking with one of my partners in LA. He owns properties with me. He also owns his own properties in a different area of Milwaukee. And I'm going up there on Thursday to have a talk with our one property manager who's not doing very well right now. And his response was, hey, why don't you meet with my my properties? He told me the name. I'm like, I bought like 3 properties off of them. They almost like bankrupt the investor a couple of years ago. Like, I'm kind of surprised that you're having such a good experience with them. But the reality is they're 2 totally different markets. So the investor had hired the PM outside of their area of expertise, and they almost went bankrupt. My own PM, we had one of the largest PM companies in Milwaukee went bankrupt and closed business. My PM took on an influx of business, and about 9 months later had to fire a bunch of clients because he decided that it wasn't economically feasible to do everything, right? So he only focuses on, like I said, 5 or 6 zip codes too. And that's where all of his people are, that's where his business is. He does not consider anything else outside those areas. I'm the same way.
So with that, so out of all these, probably I would assume maybe a 4-unit is your favorite? Because it's still...
Oh, that's a good question. Not necessarily.
Okay.
So Chicago North Side, so where I started, it's generally quite a B type market, I'll call it. Right? Tenants come in, so typically my tenants tend to be in their late 20s, early 30s. They stay for usually 2 years, 2.5 years, somewhere around there. I usually don't have problems with rent collection, and they usually leave me when they decide to have a baby or move to the suburbs. They call me like once a year. My units are all new. They very rarely cause problems. Like, I had a tenant call me the third of the month crying that she was going to pay me to the 4th, and I was like, chill, it's not a big deal, it's the 4th, you still got time. But she was like so upset, like, oh my god, I'm 3 days late, this is awful. Milwaukee is a different market. Milwaukee is a BC type market. So while we do accept Section 8, we generally don't have Section 8 tenants, but our tenant class is definitely the kind that, if something happens, they lose their job, right, and they can't find something quite quickly, it's a problem. And they don't have savings to pay rent, so generally they move out in the middle of the night. So it's a different type of market, and with tenants, it's a different type of problem. So it's a higher cash flow on paper, right? The 2% rule that people say, but it's got more expenses, and it's what we call high touch. So in Chicago, my tenants might call me every 6 months. In Milwaukee, it's once a month at least. Something's going on. It's quite rare that there's not something going on at all times up there. So it's a full-time job. What was the question? I totally forgot.
Your favorite kind?
Oh, favorite kind.
4 unit, 3 unit?
So in Chicago, I love 4 units, but up there, it's different, right? So you've got people that are generally, I even get phone calls. I try to make myself available to tenants, even though I have managers. I just got a call yesterday from a tenant complaining about the downstairs tenant. And, she's like, their kids are up at night. We get up at 6 o'clock in the morning for work. There's definitely, we've had situations even before where at one point I told both tenants, like, I'm ending both of your leases. Like, you're calling so-and-so out for doing this, she's calling you out for this, I don't care. At this point, you're both gone. Because they were just fighting, nitpicking back and forth. So there's a lot more of that going on. So 4-unit buildings are kind of hard. We actually just had my 6 units, 4 in the front, 1 in the back. My PM placed I don't know if it was a bad tenant, their sister or someone was coming over and smoking in the building, and I had all long-term tenants. They all vacated in 45 days. Everyone just got up and left. They didn't like the person that was hanging around the building, they just moved. So it's more that sort of cycle, and it's a lot riskier.
So would you say, in Wisconsin, are you looking at more single-family opportunities now, or?
No. Still multis. Said if you can find, said we've got some buildings, it's so awesome. We've got some buildings where like the mom and the sister both rent out the units. They stay for years. They are so easy. They never bother us. It just depends. We said when you're buying in a quote unquote cash flow market, you have to understand that your expenses will be higher, right? So if you were thinking that you're going to get 3% vacancy and 5% repairs, you're crazy. You plan for those kind of things, right? You plan for 10% vacancy, you plan for 10% repairs. I've got buildings that have been easy peasy for 2 years, and then for some reason when one tenant goes, the other one goes too, and then it's 3 months of vacancy. And when you're in that moment without scale, right, that building will put you close to being bankrupt, right? Because it's such a detrimental expense to have huge turnover costs plus vacancy when both of your units go. That's why scale is important, right? So when I look at it from a 2-year perspective, I stop crying and being a brat. Or when I look at my whole portfolio, right, and understand that like, hey, this is a temporary thing with one property, this is going to happen, it helps balance things out.
So what are some, obviously you've built the portfolio fairly quickly. What were some of the systems that enabled you to go from 3 properties, to 92 units? What were the systems that you had in place or that helped you get there, or was it just chaos at the time?
It was chaos.
Okay.
I wish I was smarter. So that's one of the learning lessons. Again, I grew so quickly because I knew it was important to have scale. So that guy I told you about, Carlos, that I met at the first property, he was an elementary school teacher. He'd owned a couple of properties. He'd been managing, PM on the side, and he had wanted to get into doing this full time. So when we bought our first properties, it was July, and the goal was that I would have enough business for him to quit his job when the school ended the following May. So between July and May, I bought 18 properties. That was part of the reason. Was because I liked him, still do this day. I just saw him a couple weeks ago. He treated my properties like his own, which is extremely hard to find with property management, and I trusted him, and still do. So I knew I was sticking with him, and that was our joint goal. We were growing this together. So systems, we did not have any, and it became quite clear after about 1.5 years, which is why I had to fire him, that he couldn't adapt. We just grew too fast for him. So the first year and a half, I was up in Milwaukee at least once a week. He was really great with tenants, really great with repairs, getting things done, really, really awful at accounting. And I am super crazy about accounting. Like, something is wrong with my brain. I don't know what it is, but like there's something switched up there that I love accounting. So I actually used 2 accounting systems. That was down from 3. I had to teach myself that it's okay to only have 2, and it's okay to not go back and try to find a dollar error. That took me like 1 year to like mentally get over the fact that like it's only $1, Brie, you can do a balance adjustment, it's okay. Because I'm so crazy. So I used to go up there and he would like literally hand me a pocket full of cash with like handwritten receipts. And like, so like, who paid rent? It was like, oh, you have to go through these receipts. So that was a big problem. And then he just started going depositing cash for me. But again, our property is like $35,000 a month. They make a $10,000 deposit. I'm like, what's this for? He's like, oh, there's a bunch of receipts in my pocket. Like, it was not cool. It was awful. Like, I used to go up there every week, like, no, like, he's got 2 high school kids. I go up there every week, I'd grab a double bottle of wine, and we'd sit at his kitchen table while he made dinner for his kids. I would go through all the receipts and try to figure out who owes us money, you know, and it got to be like, this is out of control. So I spent a lot of time looking through property management software systems, accounting software systems. I finally landed on Buildium. I implemented Buildium, and he just couldn't get into it. And it was at the point where I was paying him more than I pay my current manager, and I was still doing half the job. And that was not okay. So we left, and that's when we went with a different property management company, which has been a complete blessing. I went from 1 day a week up there to, I think I've been up there in November last. I'm going up there on Thursday. But it's freed up so much of my time to focus on other things, which is also how I ended up starting other companies. I got bored.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, so you went from somebody who was very disorganized. How did you find the property manager that you're using now, and how do you recommend interviewing a property manager and choosing a property manager?
Charlie, where's Charlie? I might need another drink. So, property management. So I'm a very big, I was kidding, you can, if you want to. I was just kidding. Property management just gets me fired up.
Bring me one.
So I'm a really big gut instinct type person, right? I trust my gut on everything. I tell all my clients, I tell people that I work with, right? If you go to bed at night worried about a decision, or if it's keeping you up at night thinking about it, don't do it, right? If you're looking at your first property, right, and you're up like, man, how am I gonna afford this? What should I do? Don't buy it. That's the simple answer. Because if it's keeping you up at night before you actually are in the project, it's going to keep keeping you up at night. So that's how I judge a lot of my decisions, based on my gut. And I run under the very dreamy theory that if I screw up, right, at least I trusted my gut. And if it costs me money and I lose money in the end, at least I followed what I thought was right, regardless of the outcome of it. So I remember when we decided we needed to fire Carlos, we had given an opportunity, I sat down with him and said, listen, you know, these things need to change. We had like 23 tenants on leases. It's like, oh yeah, they just pay. I'm like, they need a lease. So I gave him a list of like the 3 things, like, hey, listen, we need to get leases on people, we need this and we need this. I'm like, how long do you think it's going to take? And he said 30 days. I'm like, great, 30 days it is. Came back up and he's like, I need 2 more weeks. I'm like, great, 2 more weeks it is. I waited 2 more weeks and it was now 60 days, he didn't do it and I fired him. Right, and it was I cried. I remember I cried hysterically. I was so upset because he was so close with me. But that's another problem, is getting close to people. So when I went to go interview PMs, and they met with 6 companies, and one of the first ones I met with was this guy Jim. He's still my PM. He's one of my PMs today. I love him to death. He's a clone of myself. He's yelled at me. He's screamed at me. I've screamed at him. We've thrown things at each other. I'm not even kidding. But we can always solve any problem with a conversation, right? So no matter what tempers rise in that situation, I've never once in 2.5 years felt like he didn't treat my properties as his own, and I never felt like he was trying to scam me. So it was based on gut. I met with him. I think I had like 5 meetings set up over a 2-day period. He was the first. I met with him. I got in the car. I think I drove like maybe like 5 minutes, and I called him up. I'm like, listen, I like you. Like, you knew I'm hiring too. You're one. So now that you're safe, who else should I be like meeting with, and who else should I not be meeting with? And he told me like I would not meet with so and so and so and so. I hired another company. So I was really I really wanted to keep 2 property management companies for a lot of reasons. A, they were always competing with each other. So I always had someone as a backup in case one of them screwed up. B, they always knew there was an opportunity to double their business. So I hired 2 property managers. Jim was the first, the other one was a different guy. He had just left to get his, I think his doctorate degree at Princeton, and had people in place to manage his business. It became quite quickly apparent that they had no idea what they were doing. I had called him up from at Princeton, was like, listen, dude, like this is going down. Your people are lying to you. Here's proof they're lying to you. I remember he came home. I'm like, I'm firing you also, by the way. And Jim took over the whole portfolio. And then he came home during his spring break at Princeton and shut the whole business down. He did an audit and was like, my people were stealing rents. And it got really, really messy. I was one of the lucky ones that I fired him first. So we got our security deposits back. But it's still, from my understanding, a pretty messy situation for a lot of people because there was, people weren't being watched, right, which had happened. So we went back to one manager, then we went back to two managers in November. I'm about to maybe fire the other one for the same thing. Like the owners of the company had sold me on their systems and their processes. And I knew a couple investors that have worked with them. I've actually known, I interviewed them almost 3 years ago. They were my third choice. They were solid. As soon as I came on board, they gave me to their point person who knew everything, and they forgot about our vacancies for 6 weeks. And I emailed is there a reason? And they're like, no, we just kind of forgot. It's same thing with the furnace. This has been going on for 2 months. I'm like, someone needs to explain to me what was done before you send me $1,000 bill. Right? You need to explain how you got to that $1,000, and they still haven't been able to do it. So it's a constant battle. My gut is not always right, but I think that as soon as it starts keeping you up at night, that you need to fire your manager. You need to fire your manager. That's if you're thinking about oh, maybe it'll get better. No, it won't. You need to give them either direct. We had a call 3 weeks ago, and I gave them a direct. I need to see A, B, and C from you in 2 weeks for me to consider staying with you. And then we had a call 2 weeks later. They're like, we got A and B, but we're still working on C. I was like, I'll let you know what I decide. Right? This is your opportunity. You knew what you had to do to get there, and it was your choice not to bend over backwards to get there. That's not my problem.
So let's talk about managers to you still at least self-managed starting out. Mm-hmm. So what's your advice for maybe somebody? I recommend people starting your own, at least starting off, versus outsourcing that so you learn just like you do. So what's your advice for somebody for tenants? Is it the same thing? Gut feeling? Is there anything you're looking for? Walk us through what the ideal tenant, what their application looks like, what the interview process. Okay.
So I still self-manage my Chicago properties, and I always probably will, just because again, when you're dealing with A, B type tenants that stay 2 to 3 years and that only call you when things actually need to be fixed, it's really easy. I went to Europe for 6 weeks. I didn't even tell my tenants. There's probably the one time something actually occurred, I had it handled. I can do that stuff. But tenant screening, so there is your local laws, which you need to understand, and you need to also set a criteria. So my criteria, I do not look at credit score. I look at their specific credit report. So my rule is, what my published tenant criteria is that they can have no more than 3 late payments in 3 years. The reason I do that is because a lot of people, at least in my experience and in my own personal experience, is I screwed up in my 20s. When you're 21 and they give you a credit card, you think oh my God, it's free money. If your parents didn't teach you financial literacy, when you're 20, 21, right? Credit cards are awesome. Until you start getting the bill and realize that you have to actually have a job to pay those back. So I look at specifically the last 3 years of history. Understanding that hey, if my tenants are in their mid to late 20s, if they had a screw up or a blip, let's say, but they can show me the last 3 years, whatever it was, they overcame that and they've continued to make their payments moving forward, then that's something that I look at. I also famously, I have pet-friendly buildings. And so all my buildings pretty much have dogs, which I know a lot of landlords are against. But I did that for a few reasons. I used to live in Roscoe Village in a 6-unit building, and it was pretty crappy, but it wasn't awesome. There was no granite stainless. It was a rental quality building, but the whole building had dogs, right? And we had this big, big backyard, and all of us lived there. The only reason we moved was because we bought a house. But we all became friends. We were all the same age. We all had dogs. We all had keys to those houses, right? And we all would have stayed in that building forever. Some of my friends, I can still talk to most people in that building from that time period. And it just created, right, a very homey type environment, right? It was our own little community. It's like my building now in Portage Park all has dogs. My top floors, let's see, April will be 4 years. My first floor, August will be 4 years, and my basement's like 5 years. They all have dogs, they all get along, fenced in yard. Like if I go over there to do anything, they're like, hey, we're having a beer in the backyard together, like why don't you come join us? Like they're all friends, and they all will stay, and I don't raise their rents. Because they're very easy tenants, they all get along. But I know once one of them goes, they probably all will go. But it's been a really great few years of really easy management because of it.
So on their application, if they don't have a dog, they're not.
No, but I remember some of my favorite tenants, they came down, they live in Schaumburg. And they came down and they came into the apartment, they met me first. And I'm like, we're gonna apply. I'm like, great, like it seemed like you guys would be a good fit for the building. Like, the thing is, we've got a dog. I'm like, great, I love dogs. They're like, yeah, we brought him with us so that you can meet him. And I was like, okay. And they're like, he's a Mastiff. So he's like a 140-pound Mastiff. And they're like, no one wants to take our dog, right? Because especially my dogs are all big. All my tenants have dogs over 60 pounds. Because most landlords say no. So as long as I'm fair to them, right, they want to stay because they don't want to go through the hassle of trying to find another apartment that's going to allow a big dog. And when you've got the yappy things, it can be a problem. But Nico was like this huge. His head was like as big as my thigh. It was huge. But he was the nicest, sweetest dog for so long. And they stayed with me until they moved to the suburbs and had a baby. And they would have stayed with me forever because they could not find someone else that would allow that big of a dog.
Well, that's a great point, yeah. So, one last question, then we'll open it up. What's your advice to, this is a two-part question. What's your advice to someone that wants to start building their long-term wealth through rental properties? What would be your best advice, and then I'll do the second part to that.
Figure out what your goals are, right? There's private investing, there's notes, there's flipping, there's buy and hold, right? There's a whole bunch of different areas of this business that can all reach you to whatever your goal is, but everyone's goal is different. So I think you need to really understand that. For me, it was understanding what were my lifestyle goals, right? Being able to travel and be able to work when I want. And then understanding what I'm good at, right? I'm really good at numbers, I'm good at analyzing, I'm not good at property management. I can hire that out. But really understand, like, hey, what do I get excited about in the morning? And which one of these areas of the business can I work with that gets me to that point?
And then the next piece would be someone that maybe they own a couple properties and they feel like they're stuck. Because everybody gets stuck in their business. Do you have any advice of how, because I'm sure you've been at points in your business where you get stuck. What's your advice to somebody who's stuck where they're at right now to get unstuck?
Well, stuck can be a couple of different things. Stuck can be, you're stuck with your passion and drive, right? That's why I don't manage Milwaukee anymore, because I don't love it. My passion and my drive is not in that part of the business, so I pay people to run the day-to-day. So I felt very stuck when I was having to do it, and it felt very forced to me. Right, figure out your backup plans. And you can always pay people to do things that you don't want. But it costs me less money to go with my outsourced management than I do with my own house team. But you can also get stuck from a financial perspective, right? That's okay too, right? I think in this business, it's very hard, especially with, social media and podcasts and these websites, like, oh my God, this guy over there, like, he just bought 1,000 units. Like, I've only got 2. Like, that's okay. Not everyone wants 1,000 units. And I think it's important to understand what kind of investor you are. So, I'm a lifestyle investor, right? So, I don't care how many units I have or how big my business is. I work 30 hours a week. I travel when I want, and I sleep in whenever I wake up when I want every day. That's what's important to me. So if that means I have 3 properties, or 30 properties, or 90 properties, I really don't care, because as long as it fits in with my lifestyle goals, that's what's important. There are some people who want to, have 100 employees and a billion-dollar business, and that's cool. If that's the kind of investor that you are, right, then you need to partner with other people to get to those goals. So I think always resets are good. Whenever I've struggled, I take like a mental break from it all. It may not even be a vacation, but just to rethink, right? Why did I do this in the first place, right? What am I good at doing, and what do I not like doing? And usually it comes out to the fact I'm stuck because I'm doing something that I don't like doing. And then I figure out a way to not do that anymore.
Radically changing, like firing that person, which was tough for you because they were like almost like
Family.
family. Yeah, but that had to happen for you to.
Absolutely, there's no question about it. But again, I'm really big about self-reflection and understanding, right, why I do things, and then what is really important at the end of the day. So again, it's a business, right? It needs to be run like a business. That's regardless of feelings, emotions, whatever, goals, hopes. It's a business. I find that people get so excited, right? I said I only do like 3 things in like a 3-mile radius in 2 different cities. I really tend to focus on that small area, right? And I only do 3 things. I just do them really, really well. And when things come up that I don't know, I find someone who does know, and I pay them to do it for me.
And then one last question. What's your ideal? You're at 92 doors right now. In an ideal world, where are you looking? And again, this question is different for every person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious for yourself.
So, you kind of got to understand my life now is different than my life a few years ago. So I was married to my first husband, and we ran very separate parallel lives. So I was allowed to work 80 hours a week because we only had dinner while we watched TV for 30 hours a night. That was our alone time together. So at that period of my life, so I'd up in Milwaukee every week, or like I used to wake up in the middle of the night with Excels. Like he'd wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, like, what are you doing? I'm like running numbers. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like seriously, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you've got a laptop in your lap. But that was that phase of that business, right? Was the growth part. But it got to a point where he had to tell me, like, listen, when is enough enough? Because the way that you're going, it's dangerous for you. I was working, I said, 80 hours a week and obsessed with it all. So you need to pick a number, and that needs to be enough. And so I told him, okay, I think $25,000 a month gross rent, right before expenses, will get us to the point where that will be our financial freedom. And then I got there and I lied to him and bought some more properties. But then once we got to 35, I had said, okay, like I thought 25 was gonna be it. 35 is really where I feel like I've got enough padding for that. And that's when I started working with partners. So that was part of the deal, that I didn't want to compete with my partners. So some of them waited 1.5 years to work with me. And I'm like, listen, until I reach my own goal, then I don't want to work with you. Because I never want you to feel like, hey, Brie's taking the good stuff and giving me the leftovers. I want you to feel comfortable that I'm making a decision on your behalf. So most of my partners haven't even been to Milwaukee before. And understand that is what I'm doing. So, so in May of 2015, we hit our $35,000 goal with rental properties. My husband quit his job in August, and that's when we decided enough was enough, and that's the last time I bought for myself. Everything else since then has been with my partners. And I can't, according to our operating agreement, I cannot buy property in our zip code until they sign off on it. That's how I set it up, so that they always knew that I wasn't going to take the best of the best and give them the leftovers.
And one last thing, we'll open it up. How can people contact you? And then we'll just do some.
Sure. I'm on Bigger Pockets pretty much every single day, so you can find me there. You can also find me on my website, which is secondcity-re.com, or meetup groups. My group We do a house hacker university, so anyone that's thinking about doing that living 3% or 3.5% down, 5% down, we do an event on the first Thursday at Beguile. So our event is this Thursday with a client of mine. We interviewed someone who bought over a year ago to talk about their experience since, like, right, what they thought it was going to be like, what it's really like. This week or this month, we have a really awesome guest who we looked at 50 different properties for over a year. We couldn't find anything that we liked. We found the right property. He now does full-time, he converted the whole building to Airbnb, and he now manages my Airbnb rental as well. So it's a really interesting story of learning to adapt and to, roll the punches. And then my group meets on the third Tuesday at Dino's Pizza in Norwood Park. Our group is an open networking group. We don't do speakers, but we try to facilitate learning between people and connections and people doing deals together with each other.
Cool. All right, questions from the audience?
Sure.
You didn't say anything about condos.
I hate condos. She asked about condos. I hate condos. I will never invest in a condo myself. I will never take on a client that wants to buy a condo as an investment. I'm so morally against it that it's not worth the money for me as an agent because I won't sleep at night. I'll tell you why. Quick history about, I'll try to be quick about this, Chicago condos. So previous to the crash, right, we had built a ton of condos. And then the crash happened, right, and there were so many condos up in the market. So we look at one of the ratios we look at from a realtor perspective is if they were to stop adding new properties in the market, how long would it take for the current buyer pool to buy that out? So the condo market, according to that stat, just balanced out about a year ago. What we need to understand is downtown Chicago has had record buildings of these rental units, right? The only difference between a rental unit and a condo unit, that they built it right, they can turn it into a condo like that. So at any given time, there's tens of thousands of brand new construction rental units that are now going to be condo conversions once that market bounces back. That's reason A, right? I still don't, that's just my first reason. Second reason is HOAs. HOAs control everything. So if you're buying a condo in like a smaller, less than 8 unit building with in like a smaller HOA, I'm more open to it. But not only from a, we call it CapEx, reserve requirement issue, but for a control issue, right? So back in the day, previous 2006, a lot of condos banned rentals. And then before the housing crash happened, and they had two options, either A, allow foreclosures, which would then bring everyone's value down, or B, allow renters. Now what they're figuring out is that FHA has rules, right? Most buyers are FHA. FHA has occupancy rules. So if your building is 60% renters, your building is not FHA approved now. So now, people are starting to figure out, like, hell, our properties are sitting in the market twice as long because we bought a condo in a non-FHA approved building. So now they're throwing back in rental requirements, right? All this can happen without your approval. And if your game plan is to rent that out for 10 years and they change the rules on you, what are you going to do? Because everyone else who has condos in that area too are also going to sell, and then the market's reflooded again and you're stuck. So, super passionate about it. I really hate condos. I'm just sorry. I usually rant like Charlie does. People ask me about condos, I'll rant for like a damn hour about it. That's my short version. Yeah.
Hey, Brie. So, kind of going back, you said you bought your properties first in Chicago, and then you started looking at, what was the term that you used for the
A cash flow market.
cash flow market?
Mhm.
So being the control freak that you say you are, did you already have a plan that you were going to get a property manager, or were you planning on driving up to Milwaukee and doing this yourself?
The question was, did I always plan in an out-of-state market to have a property manager? Yes, from day one. I don't like driving. I just got a car 3.5 years ago after 12 years in the city. I'm a really, really bad driver. No joke, I have to get an oil change tomorrow because it's been 3,000 miles in my last oil change, which was last April 1st.
Oh, no.
So it's 11 months I've driven 3,000 miles. That's how much I drive. And I've got dents all over my car. It's awful. What? So I went from not having driven a car in 8 years to buying property in Milwaukee. and had to buy a car to get up there. So I always knew that I was never going to, I always knew I was never going to be up there full time. It just took a lot longer. I also always knew I was going to scale quite quickly. That was super important to me. It took a lot longer, about a year and a half of going up there. So sometimes, 2-3 days a week. Sometimes I would only go up there, once every 2 weeks, just depending on the situation. But it was, at the time, it didn't seem very draining because I had just quit my corporate job to run my portfolio full time. So I thought I'd be one of those people that like reads books in cafes, and just like chill, like on a Tuesday, like in the afternoon reading a book in a cafe. I'm not one of those people at all. But it was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. And a lot of self-reflection of realizing like, hey, this is what's going on, or like, hey, I'm noticing these trends. Like I said, I've got to call my other manager on Thursday, the one I've been with for 2.5 years, like, hey, I'm noticing these trends, and I need to either fire you, or we need to figure out how to fix this. Like, let's have a discussion about it. And they're like, we don't see what you're seeing. So I took some reports, like, here's what I'm seeing, and here's what I'm expecting from this conversation, right? I'm really good about setting expectations. I'm also really good, try to be really good about being fair, right? We just had a tenant move out in January, and they moved in September, so I yelled at them. Like, what the hell, you rented it out in September, the guy's already gone. And they're like, well, he went to jail, and he lost his job. I'm like, so who are you replacing, right, that has a record? They're like, well, I can look up the records. And he got caught for the 3rd time driving without a license. So I'm like, well, I would have approved him then too. So, but I need, set expectations, right? I can't just always yell at them for screwing up when there's a valid reason. And understand like when to push and when to sit back.
So, sorry, just a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Do these property managers charge with a percentage of the rent, or
Mhm.
a flat fee, or?
What the property managers charge. Over the years, I've done different things. They generally charge between 6 and 9% of the monthly gross income, and then they charge a lease-up fee. It varies how I've set it up before, with half a first month's rent, or my first PM, what I might be going to again, is I set it up on a occupancy bonus. So I figured that my tenants would leave every 18 months, and I took what that commission would be, and I divided it over 18 months, and then I paid them a monthly bonus for not losing tenants. And that's something I did for the first almost 2 years of the business. But when I went to the new PMs, it sounded really complicated, and they were already taking over a really chaotic situation for me. It just sounded like too much work. But that's something that we're going to probably be revisiting this week. Because that incentivizes them. They get paid on keeping tenants. They don't get paid on releasing out the units. So it kind of realigns our goals, right, with what we both want. And that's a different way to look at it.
Question back in that. When you statement you indicated that some of your property have an LLC, the first 3 you said that you don't have an LLC. Why did you decide not to do that?
LLC versus non-LLC. I would prefer to not have any properties in LLC because, on non-LLC properties is given to you as a person. You get 30-year fixed residential financing. So you're looking at, 4% interest over 30-year fixed. When you do LLCs, you're automatically looking at 5% interest. That's a really good interest rate. It's a 5-year balloon. So that's the risk of commercials. Your terms, once you get above about 5 million, you can start looking at like 10-year fixed, but generally it's 5-year fixed. So if someone does something to our economy, and rates go up to 14%, I'm screwed. It's as simple as that. My balloons start coming up in 2019 to 2020, and if those rates go up to 14%, I've got no option but to sell like everyone else, flood the market, oversaturate, probably take a loss, or go to 14% interest rates.
I was gonna add too with that, with the commercial loans, not only do they renegotiate the rate, but they might not, if it's a down market, they may not re-up your loan as well. So if you go to get a commercial loan in 5 years and the economy looks really bad, even if you've paid them on time every single month and you've been the best borrower ever, they can choose not to read, and now that loan comes due.
So that 5-year loan comes through, I gotta do something with it.
Mhm.
It's just gonna be sell,
So-
in a down market, it could be, so that's another risk with the,
Yeah, for me, that there's a 10 unit or 10 loan max with residential. So I knew that was the risk I was taking on. Was that, hey, listen, if I go in this commercial world, I better maximize it and go over 10. And make the best of it. But we also understand, that's why you also understand, like, there's a lot of risk involved with it. If the market changes or the rates go up, my number should have been, I should have bought right from the first place to withstand that sort of turbulence in the market. Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's actually a couple of questions, but going back to that. So if you're buying these multi-unit properties in your own name, then you're personally liable.
Even with commercial, you're personally liable. So,
Right, but if you had an LLC.
no, you're still personally liable.
you sign a personal guarantee.
So with commercial financing, people think that LLCs are like God's gift to liability protection. The reality is, if you're starting out with commercial, it's almost always going to be a personal guarantee. So even though my LLC owns the properties, the loans are my LLC, if I default, they can still go after me. Commercial is really weird in the fact that if you're under $1 million, it's automatically personal guarantee. Once you get a few $1 million, but it's a weird world where the more money you want, the easier it is. The less money you want, the harder it is to get. So it is much harder for me to get a $500,000 loan in commercial than it is for me to get a $5 million loan. So then once I start in the $5 million range, it's usually not a personal guarantee. But my first time around, it was always a personal guarantee. So if something goes wrong, they can still come after me and take my house and all the same things as it would with a normal loan.
Then, because you mentioned off a bunch of first Thursday and third Tuesday.
Yeah, sorry.
All this other stuff.
So many events, I'm
Is there
exhausted.
just like one place you can go to kind of?
Meetup.com.
Right, but I mean, like, if I wanted to go, like, 'cause you said Second City.
Opt into
Yeah, meetup.com, like when we found this
Right,
event,
right.
my group is called, I think it's called Chicago Real Estate Investors Meetup.
And then to get a hold of you, Second City.
secondcity-re.com.
Okay, that's it. Go back to, you were talking about trends.
Yeah,
And also.
trends and cycles.
Right, and also when you're looking at the zip codes and the
Mhm.
properties that you're looking at, what kind of research are you doing to come up with the zip code you want to look at, as well as the properties within that zip code? How you shortlisting them?
How am I determining the market? That's a really good question. So, Chicago's a bit different for me, but I've lived here for 12 years. I've literally looked at every single property on the MLS, at least pictures, on the north side of Chicago for about 7 years now. So for me, it's all in my head. Going to Milwaukee, it was a really hard, I wasn't grasping it, right? So one of the things I always suggest to people is I set up Redfin alerts. Every morning, commit 20 minutes a day and just look through the pictures, right? Look through the pictures, see what's coming up, see what's going off the market fast, see what the rents are. You won't realize it at the time, but if you do that every day for 20 minutes, at a certain point, something's gonna come up and you're like, oh man, that's overpriced. Like, oh dude, I can get better rents than that. Like, you just start internalizing the data. Sometimes it takes 3 months, sometimes it's 6 months, but that's how I did it. I started looking at the listings every single day. Every day, committed 20 minutes looking at the listings. But how I found that zip code, again, I met with 3 different agents. I just called 3 random agents who work with investors and said, hey, I'm gonna buy $500,000, what would you buy? Pick me off today. And they all showed me what they would buy. And 2 of them, I was like, it didn't resonate with me, but the one took me out and I liked the area. I just got it immediately, and that now became my focus. And then, so it's just one of those things that it took me a while. So I think we started going up there in February. We bought our first properties in July. It wasn't until October of going up there every weekend that now I can walk a property in 5 minutes and say, I'll offer this. It's as simple as that, but it takes looking and time and experience of going through and doing it all in your head.
And then for the Chicago area, I mean, I understand you grew up here, but
Mm-hmm.
did you pretty much say, okay, this is the areas that I want to look at, because you
Yeah.
like them better than others and so on and so
When I started with Chicago, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't, the lack of knowledge is so laughable at this moment of my life. Like, I'm so lucky I did not lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I bought in 2011 in August, and I chose Albany Park. And why I liked Albany Park was it has the Brown Line at Kedzie, the Brown Line at Kimball, North Park University, Northeastern Illinois University. It's got River Park. And in 2011, I had noticed that there was some new construction buildings, but then the crash happened, and they were all sitting vacant. So my thoughts were, whenever the market bounces back up, this is going to be a neighborhood that people are going to start going into. So, plus, we only earned $12,000. So we bought, we didn't have that much money. We bought a $300,000 house, and it was what we could afford. It was a great decision, luckily. But that's one of the things I look for. I made a huge mistake the other day. So we're part of, there's a network, it's called Top Agent Network. So if you're in the top 10% of agents in Chicago, we have our own website where we can share off-market deals, we can post what buyers want, and all the top 10% of agents get it. So I made a huge mistake the other day, and I posted on TAN and said, I got a buyer who's looking for $1.2 million. I'm like, hey, listen, open in Northside neighborhoods, budget's 1.2, like, send me what you got off market. And I got like 15 emails in 5 minutes. I was like, this is awesome, so excited. I'm looking through this stuff, I'm like, it's fucking 4 caps. Like, it's all 4 caps in Lincoln Park. I'm like, this is not a cash flow, like, property. And so the one guy yelled at me, he's like, well, you should go back and change your post. I'm like, I'm sorry, when I said an investor is looking for a property, I assumed it was like general knowledge that leads to cash flow. So I had to go back and change it to at least show me 6s. And quickly realized that retail agents don't know investors. A. B, those sort of areas, that all I got was Lincoln Park, Bucktown, Andersonville. You're talking like $300,000-$400,000 down payments just to break even every month. And it was a complete waste of my time. So I think, at least in my experience with Chicago, you're going to be looking in like I would say along 90, 2 miles off of 90, right, I would say. Going up to Edison Park, down to, once you hit Bucktown, it's too expensive. But one thing you also need to understand, all of you, is loan limits. Our biggest problem with Chicago, if you're going to house hack or owner occupy, is loan limits. So for FHA, your loan limits are $468 for a 2-unit, $565 for a 3-unit, and $703, right, Charlie, for a 4. And then with conventional, it's $585 for a 2, $686 I think for a 3, and $871 for a 4. So if you see a really awesome 2-flat in Roscoe Village for $900,000, the reality is the loan limit is $600,000, and you need to count that cash difference to buy it. So it automatically prices out anything east of Western is pretty much priced out when it comes to loan limits.
You're mostly looking at turnkey stuff?
That's a good question. My clients are mostly looking at turnkey.
One thing too, so we're gonna do, no more questions for the other one. We've got 1,
Yeah.
2, no, we got too many hands. 3, and then if you got, all right, 4.
I'll try to be quick.
And then after that, if you got questions, you can talk to Brie.
The question was, do I most look at turnkey? Depends on the client, right? So I think one thing that investors, especially new investors, really need to understand is cash on cash return. So I always tell the story of, I was buying a duplex in Milwaukee for $30,000. It needed $20,000 of work, and then it had a $20,000 structural basement problem, and it rented for $1,350. So who here would pay $70,000 for a property that rents for $1,350? Really? 2% rule? Come on, seriously? That's like a home run deal. I didn't buy it, I backed out of it. Here's why. I thought I was gonna do it, but then I thought about, right, I needed 20% down in the 30, and then I needed $20K to rehab the unit, I needed $20K to do the structural work, right? So that's what figures besides the down payment. $40,000 of cash out of my pocket. But the reality is that $40,000 of cash is actually $200,000 of house I can't buy next, right? I don't have unlimited money. I've only got a certain amount of money to spend. So when I looked at it from that perspective of what can I buy this house for $70,000, or what could I buy a few properties for $230,000, and compared that cash flow, the $230 blew out of the water. So that's one of the things that depends on each investor, depends on what you're looking for, but that if you've got $30,000 and you want to buy your first property, it is going to be turnkey. Because every dollar you spend on that property is going to be money that you can't put into it or buy it down the road, right? And two properties are going to always be better cash flow than one. Try to move quickly, sorry, go ahead.
For Airbnb, what kind of property would pay, what areas, and what's the, if I'm self-managing them, what will be the?
Airbnb.
Yeah, cash on cash return.
I actually cannot answer any of your questions.
Okay.
He asked, like, what am I looking for? What sort of areas? I have no idea. Mine was not intentional. I did not buy my property for Airbnb. It was a property I owned with my first husband, and we got divorced, and we co-owned that property together. So we didn't, it was on the market, it didn't sell, we decided to Airbnb it. So I didn't intend for it to be Airbnb, and I have a manager. So I think I moved out in September. I've been there twice. I get a report every month, I review it, it's like 5 minutes, and then that's it. So I don't know too much about it, but on Thursday, we're going to be talking more about Airbnb. Oh, I forgot. The other reason why I'm here is we are doing the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit this May at UIC. So I'm speaking, Josh is speaking, Frank Montreux, who was here last week, is also a speaker. That website is midwestresummit.com. We've got a whole panel on Airbnb because that's a huge topic. And I've had dinner with the lawyer who worked for Airbnb, representing them against the city of Chicago, because there's a lot of tricky rules and regulations and same thing with condos, right? Where the rules can change at any point. And I think it's really stupid for anyone to be buying a building strictly with the intention of Airbnb, right? The numbers need to work from a conventional rental perspective, and then if you do decide to Airbnb it, that's gravy. But if something happens regulation-wise, you need to go back to what the original numbers were and be okay with that. Sorry, go ahead.
Take it back to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
You explain how you got to the zip code.
Yeah.
I'm curious, once you're there, what you are looking at, parameters of buying the property. Is it something just cap rate? Is it condition? Is there?
So the question was what I'm looking at when I'm looking at the property specifically in Wisconsin. There's a lot of different factors. I will take a lower cap rate on something that's got potential. So there's, within any zip code, within any area, there's certain areas that are better than others. It's really weird. There's 2 streets in my zip code that I will not buy on. I can't explain why, but like both times I went to go look at properties in that street and like I just got the chills. And it was like, nope, not going to do it. But there's other properties that, you know, I bought in a really good block in a really good area that I probably will never sell. So I will take a lower cap rate for a property that is already rented out, that's already got good tenants, that's already rehabbed in a good area. I'll take 2% less cap rate than something I need to put work into to get it up to that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but so what's your cap rate?
We had our worst performing year last year on my portfolio in Milwaukee, and we performed at a 9.37% cap rate. That was our worst performing year by a lot. We lost $60,000 last year that was historically unlike any other year that we've done. So I don't look at anything below 11 or 12% cap rate.
And what's your
2 years ago.
What's the average that you put into each new property?
20%.
Question.
Yeah.
On the bank, you mentioned you made a bunch of calls to banks, which is amazing,
Mhm.
by the way. Who was that bank you ended up selecting? And then you said it's easy to get $5 million. I want to know where and what's the
You have to have experience to get $5 million. Yeah. Everyone's quite surprised, U.S. Bank. So again, at the Midwest Real Estate Summit that Josh and I were both speaking at, we've got a whole panel on that, and I selected my banker from U.S. Bank is coming down, from Wisconsin to come talk. He doesn't actually work at U.S. Bank anymore, he works at Bank of the West. which is a California-based bank. After 18 years of working there, they wanted him to come start the regional division because they wanted to make a splash in this market. So he's got, like, anyone can go out and get, pretty much anyone can go out and get, you know, a 1.2 DSCR, a 5-year fixed, you know, at 5.5% and a 25-year amortization. That's all very vanilla stuff. But then, like, he'll come in, Richard. I call him Ricky. He gets so mad when I call him Ricky in public. Ricky, like, they're doing like 15-year fixed on 15-year AMs at like 4.75, which is like unheard of in commercial. So there's a lot of more, even just yesterday someone emailed me about doing 90-10s on commercial. There's a lot more creative financing going on right now. And who was it? Andrew Holmes said it. When there's three things, I forgot the third thing though. There's either deals or there's money, right? Right now there's money, which means there's not deals, right? Unfortunately though, when there's deals, there's not money. So it's always gonna cycle. Right now money is really easy, but deals are really hard to find. That's the biggest problem, hands down.
So, I have a question in regard to scale. So,
yeah.
Currently I own one property in my mom's house that I'm renting out to family. And I came up with an opportunity to buy an 18 house portfolio in Milwaukee, coincidentally. And I'm thinking maybe that's too big for me to scale. I just got with a group of money people. I have all the money to do the deal, but I'm not confident in myself in buying 18 properties within like the first 4 months really of owning the real estate. And in terms of like how you scale, I'm thinking maybe I could just buy a couple properties and let that deal go, but I understand how hard deals are right now, and it's someone who's really looking to get rid of the portfolio.
That's a really, oh God, that's a really interesting question. So the question was, if he's owned real estate for 4 months, he just got presented with a really good deal of 18 properties. It might be above his head, but deals are also very hard right now, so what to do?
My 2 cents is find potential partners.
That's what I was gonna say.
Tie it up first. Don't start like advertising this deal until you have it under contract.
And I've got people.
And then find the partner.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can tell me. Don't tell anyone else.
Is it on the north side or south side?
I think it's the northwest side.
Okay. I've got people I can put you in touch with that might be able to help. That either are they're investors there. So if the deal's as good as you say, like if it's a really good deal, they'll be willing to partner. I would partner. So the thought of even, like you asked me the question, like made me nauseous. As being like a first, a newbie investor, like that's a really big take on, right? And I said, I think especially with Milwaukee, right, we get, in general, I think that when we're not very experienced, we see the glitter and the glam and it's a, X% cap rate, right? Most times that's not reality. So I said, the people that call me and say, hey, I want to do this, I'm like, are you running a 10% vacancy? Are you using 10% repairs? Are you using 10% management, right? If the numbers still work out with those numbers in a cash flow market, right, then it's okay. But if you are thinking that like, I'm going to use, 3% vacancy and 5% repair in a cash flow market, right, it's only a cap rate on paper. And so every market's different. North side Chicago is different than west side, than south side, than Indiana, than Milwaukee, than the suburbs. You really need to know what that market dictates, and then whatever you think it's going to be, add like 120% to that as far as your numbers are concerned. So I can tell you from my experience, if anyone hears from bigger pockets, they discuss the 50% rule, which drives me crazy. But when I work with my clients here in Chicago and Milwaukee, I use the average of my own numbers. So I go back and look at my 3-year average of my numbers, and then I add a little cushion to that. So in 3 years of Chicago, my vacancy has been 0.25%. That's my average running rate for the last 3 years. My vacancy in Milwaukee has been on average 13%. Right? So if I would have went in with my Chicago mindset, like, oh my God, my tenants never leave, this is great, right? And bought properties thinking that was my cash flow, I would have been crying in a ball in my bed. So, like seriously. Even with our worst year last year, hands down by far, and we still outperformed most other investors. But again, it's about being conservative and knowing what your limitations are.
Last question on that right here, and then you can talk to Brie afterwards.
I guess something briefly, I'm not sure where your properties here in Chicago are, but how do you see the market going forward with all the construction, new construction coming out, all the boom?
Good question. Good question.
And
Which-
how you see
It's gonna be a long one. I'll try to be quick.
yeah, I can see it. And then with all the construction, I'm sure you've been adjusting your rents.
Yeah, so the question was, especially with Chicago, on the north side at least, there's a lot of construction development going on and where I see the market going. I don't know where to start that one. Right, everyone talking about a bubble. So I was in San Francisco this last year. It's my third year speaking at the conference in San Francisco. Really some incredibly smart people. Don't you know Bruce Norris? He was the economist that predicted the crash. He was one of our speakers. I said, I've been for 3 years in a row, and we're given a topic, right? Like, Brie, you talk about this, and then we write our own content. No one dictates our presentation. This year was a really weird year because there was people that I've been there with for multiple years, and the tone was very different than other years. The tone was very not much about when the crash happens. Not if, not like it was when. There is going to be a change in our market. No one knows where or when or what yet. But so even Bruce Norris spoke about it too. Like, there's going to be a recession in 2018. He guarantees it. So it's going to be small, but no one knows, right? So looking at market cycles, the most interesting thing that they showed me at that event was they took, so this is California, so I understand that. They took the unemployment rate since 1960 and took that graph and put it on top of a graph of every single recession. Every single time our employment rate dipped to historic lows, it was immediately followed by a recession. Every single time for the last almost 60 years. That was a very awakening fact of something is going down. So keep that in mind. Second part of that is, we were talking about this earlier, who's here been in Chicago for at least 5 years, right? Isn't Chicago such a great city, right? So when you look at the cost of Chicago real estate, you compare that to New York and LA, which LA sucks, let's be honest. But Chicago housing prices are drastically different, right? And then you take Chicago and you compare that to what I consider second-tier cities. Boston, Portland, Seattle, Austin, San Diego, right? Chicago, like, they do not hold a candle to Chicago. And we are still about a third of the price per square footage in those cities. So why can't Chicago be better and more expensive than those cities? We have everything here. So while the markets might be going down, Chicago as a city is so cheap compared to any other major city in the United States that I think there's a huge area for us to go up. Now, to your other question about development. So this is, I don't know the south side very well, or the west side, so I'll talk specifically about the north side. DePaul did a study in 2004 which analyzed Chicago's housing stock. Chicago has a very unique housing stock compared to other cities. There's actually only a handful of cities that are set up the way that we are, which is it's very dense, so there are 2 to 4 units. So in the north side neighborhoods like Albany Park, Portage Park, Irving Park, Logan, all those areas, in 2004 when the study was done, those areas had about 70% 2 to 4 units. About 10% single families, and then the other 10% or the other 20% were condos or large multi-unit or mixed use. So someone figured out that when I bought in 2011, the reason I bought a multi-family is because single families were so expensive. They were so expensive because there's limited inventory, supply versus demand, right? So someone smart figured out, like, hey, like I'll take Bell School, if that's the area that I know in North Center. In Bell School, you could have bought a 2-unit, right? That's a 3,000 square foot 2-unit for $650. You could renovate it and sell it for $1.8, right? Someone smart figured it out. But then everyone else jumped on the bandwagon. So what happened over a few years in that school district is a few things. What used to sell for 1.8 to 2 million is now sitting in the market for average of 240 days, and it's selling for like 1.3. Right? Back then, like, you were putting it on the market, like, it was going off the market like that, because there was like 1 month of these properties coming up in that school district. Now there's, I think, 18 sitting. So we changed the way the supply and demand worked for that area. That's happening all over Chicago. With all these deconversions, we are decreasing density right? And creating more single families that are now creating less apartments. So Chicago aldermen, who have the end-all be-all when it comes to our zoning, for the last couple of decades have always talked about decreasing density. So if you look at any zoning map in Chicago, all the side streets are all residential. They're not 2 to 4 units anymore. So when you start messing with the property, you're bringing it back to its current state, which is a single family, right? You're not going against its grandfathered state, which is multi-unit. The 47th ward, that's my ward, Maya, is the first alderman I've ever heard of that all of a sudden was like, holy crap, we're taking away all these apartment buildings and now no one can afford housing, right? So now everyone's complaining about affordable housing. Well, guess what happens after 30 years of you guys tearing down apartment buildings and making single families, right? Rents are gonna go up in the area because supply and demand. So I think that there's going to be a switch in our mindset over the last 30 years that we've been doing with deconversion. But what it does for us landlords is neighborhood by neighborhood. It used to be only East and Western. Then it got to be Horner Park, right? And then it was never north of Montrose. Now it's north of Montrose. Every time it keeps moving into these new areas, and we keep deconverting stuff and decreasing density, which then makes rents go up, and makes housing more and more less affordable for people. But that's why people are complaining and protesting in certain neighborhoods about the lack of affordable housing, because we're taking, small permanent buildings and making these, condos and redeveloping, and it's not sustainable for a long period of time. I think we're going to see a change in aldermanic opinions about density quite soon, because now, so at least with the 47th, now they're complaining like, oh, there's no one to pay taxes. Well, yeah, we used to take a block of, there's 35 apartment buildings and 5 single families. Now there's only 5 apartment buildings, you've got less people to pay taxes. So now you're poor and you can't fund the schools because you guys kept decreasing density. And that's my short answer.
Thank you. So that's it. Please give Brie a huge